Yeah,
honeypot. Honeypot.
Yep.
Oh my God, dude. Dangerous.
I saw a portion of that episode.
Did you?
Yeah, I did.
It
was good.
Yeah, I just saw a portion of it myself, but I was thinking, these poor guys, man, just like really.
Yes, without a doubt. Yeah. Rock and roll.
Cool. Dave, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you too, Chris.
Security X, right? Phoenix.
Yes.
Yeah. What do you think of the show?
Fantastic. I thought it was great.
Yeah. I got to be honest. I was surprised. I really was. I didn't expect it to go as well. I know that sounds. I just didn't expect it most of the security trade shows, but the people there, Scott Walker, Mike Trotter, those guys, had a good group of people, including yourself, and that's why you're here today. I really appreciate you coming.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. How was the drive, by the way?
Uneventful, just the way I like it.
Just the way you like it. I bet. What do you think of the studio?
Fantastic. This is a very professional setup, for sure.
Yeah, I always tell everybody thinks, oh, you just throw some tiles up and stuff. And I got to blame Steve, my engineer over here. I had it all decked out, I thought, in the very beginning. He comes in, he looks at it, and he says, let me show you what lighting does. Brought lighting, and then you could see every little line in the tile. And it's like, oh, my God. And these all change colors, and then you got soundproofing and everything else. So we revamped it, and it seems to be working pretty good now. We're going to you're always making changes. It's like your first website, right? You go back and look at it, and you go, I can't believe I started with that.
100%, but that's what happens when you bring in a professional. Right?
Yeah, works out pretty good. Works out real good. You know what? I was looking at your LinkedIn profile.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. I don't think we have all the time to talk about everything you've done, but I do want to highlight and just go through it and start with that. United States Air Force, security police officer for Livermore, police officer for the Department of Defense. You went over to my old neighborhood for a little bit, or in Gardena for a little bit.
Yes, I did.
Background investigator for Department of Defense, law enforcement training coordinator. Then you went to deputy chief, and then I guess you retired as regional chief police emergency management before Secure Measures LLC.
That is correct. That is my trajectory, for lack of a better term.
They've had a great career, dude.
I would say so. I think I've been very fortunate and grateful for the experiences that I've had, for sure.
Yeah. If you can, let's go back. You hear me do this with everybody.
Sure.
Tell me about your family, if you don't mind, because everybody always says, I always say this, but if you don't mind, just start with that, and then let's go into the United States Air Force and crank it up, and then we'll get into the secure measures.
Sure. So I grew up in the San Fernando Valley after moving here from the East Coast, from New Jersey specifically. My dad got a new job out here, so we, for lack of a better term, started over here in California, just a typical middle-class family. And my father's a veteran. He served in the National Guard. All my grandfathers, uncles served in World War II, so I have a long history of veterans in my family. Of course, most of them were in the Army or Marine Corps, so they would have probably frowned upon my going into the Air Force and not carrying the torch, if you will. Dad by trade was an accountant. Mom was a teacher. So I had a pretty structured upbringing. And after I graduated high school, looking for direction, and then a family friend who works for your old alma mater, LASD, took me on a few ride-alongs, and I was hooked at that point. But that was the early 90s, when there were a lot of hiring freezes. And my dad suggested I look into the military. And that was probably one of the best decisions I ever made.
Yeah, I noticed you got a master's degree. Did you do that at a high school, or did you do that later on?
So my master's degree was in 2022, actually. Okay. So it's fairly recent. And I have my bachelor's in Homeland Security and Emergency Management. And initially, I was looking at getting my MBA. And I have a lot of respect and trust with my father. And I was talking to him about maybe pursuing a master's degree, and I thought maybe an MBA would be great because I run a business, all that kind of stuff. He said, you're learning in real time. You're probably not gonna get much out of an MBA program. You should look at something different. And because we do a lot of work in the crisis response space, a degree in psychology seems more appropriate. So that's what I did. I pursued my master's in psychology.
Boy, you know what? Your dad gave you a hell of a gift on telling you that story.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Incredible, because I'm not really impressed with anybody with an MBA. I hate to say it that way, but yes, but people love to talk about it. I got an MBA, man.
I think that degree is relevant for certain backgrounds. However, for what I'm doing, or for what we do in the security and law enforcement space, I think the mental health is a much better trajectory, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. So Air Force, jumped in the Air Force program. What'd you do through Air Force?
Military policeman. Did a lot of different things in the Air Force. I will say that I deployed. I joined right after Desert Storm, so I'm a Desert Storm era guy. And deployed and had a lot of different experiences in the Air Force that really shaped both my worldview and my professional view of what it meant to serve. And that's really how my life has always been after that. It's about service and it's about brother and sisterhood and all of those things. And I tell this story that it's not really a story so much as every year since I've been out of the Air Force, and I got out in just early 2001. So I served 8 years total, 4 years on active, 4 years in the reserves. Pretty much every year I still get together with guys and gals that I served with every single year. We go up to Bishop, where one of my buddies lives, and his wife has to babysit 5 or 6 man children that show up every Veterans Day to really just connect and be present. And, that is true friendship and true brother and sisterhood for sure.
Yeah, I was real impressed with you and Scott's relationship. Really like that. And I just, when you get involved in business sometimes you get so busy, you get away from friends and family because you're just constantly going before it's 1 year, 2 year. You're always developing relationships, but they're business relationships versus the 5 people in your hand you can count on, I always say. So I was pretty impressed you guys had the relationship. Really was.
Yeah, Scott and I have known each other for almost 30 years. And there's few people in this world that I can count on more than Scott. There are, but Scott is definitely a reliable one. So shout out, Scott.
Yeah, absolutely. It was both. You guys are like twins as far as personalities. The energy between you two in a room, man,
pretty much.
Really solid energy. And you're both great speakers. So Scott's talk was real entertaining too. I really liked it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of nuggets of wisdom, and there's a lot of things that I certainly agree with him about, not just because he's my friend, just because I feel like his view of things is probably more unique than most, but something that you can certainly gravitate towards.
Yeah, absolutely. So did the Air Force establish where you wanted to be? Did you enjoy it?
I was a law enforcement specialist. At the time, there were two sides you could go into. You could either be a security specialist, which would have probably ended me up at Minot, North Dakota, sitting in a missile field somewhere. Or you could be a law enforcement specialist, which means you're doing more law enforcement related work. And I knew that's really what I wanted to do with my life. And backing up, prior to joining the Air Force, I had been applying to places like LAPD, LA Sheriff's, because I knew I wanted to get into law enforcement, but because of all the hiring freezes around that time, nobody was hiring. So about a week before I left for basic training, I got a call from LASD Reserve Forces Bureau. Hey, Dave, do you want to be a reserve deputy? And I said, where were you guys like 4 months ago?
It never fails.
No. And when I told him, I said, I would love to do that. Unfortunately, I'm leaving for the Air Force in a week. And he said, I rescind our offer to join the reserves because I had completed all of my processing. He goes, I rescind it based on the fact that you're going to get such an experience in the Air Force. And when you're done with the Air Force, if you decide not to make it a career, you give us a call. So my career just took me in a lot of different ways. So I never ended up making that call. But I just thought that was very interesting that he saw value. Hey, you're joining the military. So you're going to get a lot of what we try to teach people in the basic academy.
Absolutely. So, yeah, without a doubt. And the guys that were in the military, it was a breeze. Definitely a breeze. And when I was in the academy, I was amazed too how many people dropped out. Just shocking.
Without a doubt.
All that time too, Dave, going in for a year, the background, and go take that whole walk, all that in the academy, first, second day, drop.
Yeah. Fortuitously, if that's a word, I still ended up in the Sheriff's Academy, except in Sacramento, because our squadron at the time had a lot of reservists who were either CHP deputies as reservists, and they opened up slots for us. So I was basically kicked loose from active duty for about 6 months to go through the full post academy, which was a great experience. Wonderful experience. And to your point, all of the academy DIs kind of leaned on, because there were 4 of us that went from our base, and they leaned on us. Hey, show these folks who never know how to march, what a gig line is, like all of these different things, how to wear their uniform. So they leaned on the military folks since we were doing it in real time.
Yeah, so, made you guys the class sergeants, the platoon sergeant, and everything else. Huh?
What I My focus was, hey, I just want to graduate. I just want to go through this and be successful. And but I was squad leader, platoon leader, just because of those factors. But that also showed me how much they valued military experience at that point.
Yeah.
Which is a great thing.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. That's great. So Air Force to the Livermore.
So that's where I ran into Scott Walker. That was for the U.S. Department of Energy. Scott and I were assigned to a tactical team that protected special nuclear material and the facility itself, but we were specifically assigned to this facility for what they call recapture recovery operations. So we were the tactical unit that defended our nuclear material.
If you can, tell me if you can, say, what does that look like? What does your day look like in protecting something like that?
I liken it to an insurance policy, break glass in case of emergency, and that's really what we were. Our day was filled with a lot of training, but it was also filled with a lot of how often do you actually hear of a terrorist attack on a nuclear facility? The reason is because you have these specialized teams that sit in those facilities that are ready and waiting all the time, and which is a heavy burden up here a little bit because you're constantly in this position of vigilance all the time. But we had early warning systems. We had a lot of technology surrounding it. We had a lot of different things. I urge people, if you want to know more about DOE SRT is what it's called, Special Response Team, go on the internet and look those teams up. Those are some of the top tier teams in the country as far as SWAT teams.
All right. So glad to know serious game at the nuclear facility.
100%.
All right. No, you were impressed the whole time, training, people.
Yeah, it was great. And most of the people, going back to the military stuff, a lot of the people that got hired there or was in our cohort was guys like Scott and other folks that have had prior experience, were in the military. So it was I'd say 96% of the team was only military.
Okay.
And we had, I think our initial cohort, we had about 40 or 50 folks that got hired off the bat from different backgrounds.
Wow. How big was the team? Was it 24? Obviously 24 hours.
It was 24/7. So we probably had at its peak probably 60 or 70 rotating through different shifts and stuff like that. And there were times where we went into 12-hour shifts just because staffing and other things. But that place was never unprotected, and we had all the toys you could possibly think of.
I'm not going to say was there any close calls, but can I ask? Was there anything that?
So to show you, I work graveyards most of the time, and it was very quiet because the facility wasn't open. And on the facility, there was trash pickup, and a trash truck actually backed into one of the fences that surrounded this facility and set off all kinds of alarms. And our dispatch center basically said, hey, there's a truck that just backed into the fence. We have no idea at that point, is it purposeful or accidental, but you still have to respond.
Sure.
And you still have to check it out. Turns out it was just the trash guy.
Yeah.
And it was just an accident, but we were there on top of it super quick. But that was really the extent of that. Again, we were there as a team to respond to the most critical and serious of incidents. And fortunately, nobody ever tried.
Yeah.
Which is why that is a deterrent. I think some people look at, you didn't do anything. Actually, we did a lot. We did a lot of training and we did a lot of preparedness. And that deterrent alone is the idea.
Sure.
To me, our lack of activity showed we were doing the right things.
Yeah,
in my
absolutely.
opinion.
Absolutely. No, that's where you really get into crisis management. Would that be fair to say? What a skill set. I can imagine all the training. That is terrific to know. It really is. That really sets it off right there. And I guess that from there, you go into, let's just go right to the Department of Defense. I won't even get into Gardena.
Sure.
That's why
Sure.
you probably didn't stay long there. You probably were bored. What really took you, where were you in your career where you said, hey, crisis management, risk management, the stuff you're doing today, all the way up to not secure measure. Mm-hmm. When did you get this idea that this was something really needed?
So from Department of Energy, after a while, I was just seeking more from my career. It's not that I didn't enjoy what I was doing. It's just I wanted to do other stuff. So I transitioned down here, became a police officer at Los Angeles Air Force Base, and then had other opportunities there. And while I was there, that's when 9/11 happened. So there was a lot of activity around that. But I got the opportunity to be a background investigator. I got promoted to sergeant while I was there. A lot of different things, and it was an enjoyable part of my life. But it's just like any career. You get to sergeant, and you're like, what's the next level? What's the next level like? And then transitioned up to Fort Irwin, which is the National Training Center, which is still kind of Department of Defense, Department of the Army. Denadeli Air Force Base, we say DOD, but it's DOD Air Force or DOD Army. And went up to Fort Irwin and became the training coordinator up there, and really caught the training bug more than anything else, because I was given the freedom to develop things. Went through some instructor courses like incident command and stuff like that. So I'm an incident command ICS instructor for CBRN, and 100, 200, 300, 400. I can teach all of those classes.
Incident command. Can you give us a little? Tell us what's that.
The ICS protocols is something that is rooted in the fire service, and that's what they use to manage like wildland fires and things like that. But that has become more broadly adopted in I would say, the first responder community as a standard process of how we respond and mitigate disasters, emergencies, like the wildfires we had here in LA County. They were likely using incident command to marshal forces, bring in aircraft, and other types of things that would be helpful in navigating those very challenging circumstances. So it's basically an emergency response structure.
Yeah, so all that stuff, I'm sure everybody wondered. We had the fires over here. There's a lot that goes into that, right? When Incident Command rolls in, and they've got pretty good protocols and all the training involved too. Who's going to come out, fly out, all the way down, huh?
Yeah. And bringing in mutual aid and having joint command, police, fire, EMS, or it could be multi-state, right? You could be bringing in resources, because we have mutual aid agreements with other states to bring in resources. And we, in LA County, we typically send search and rescue for disasters and stuff. So there's a lot of, and ICS also really establishes that common operating picture, that common language. So regardless of where you go in the U.S., everybody's speaking the same language. So if search and rescue from here ends up in Idaho or Minnesota, they're talking the same language.
So big background, crisis management, huge background.
Yes.
I've always wondered, since you have this background, what's the biggest fear? Because communication, I was told, obviously, we have a major event, terrorist, and crisis management comes into play. What could take that out? What would take that out and make it very difficult to be able to communicate to emergency services details? And what would the terrorist point of view, what would they want to do to penetrate that or make it more difficult for us to perform those services?
I think having a multi-pronged kind of attack, at least from a terrorist perspective, if you're hitting multiple places, and you're familiar with these, but like swatting type calls, you're creating diversions over here while you're over on the other side of town causing problems and havoc and other things. So I also think one of the bigger fears is disinformation and misinformation, false flag type stuff. I think that is probably a bigger, because as we're responding to a situation, do we know if it's factual? And from being in law enforcement, the call you get over the radio or the MDC is never the call you arrive at. So what do you do then? You already know going into it that you have to be semi-prepared for whatever you're dealing with. But the reality is that a multi-vector attack is going to be biggest, trying to take out communications and taking out people and situations, or creating explosions and other things to disrupt or disorient responders, I think, is the biggest, in my view.
Yeah, very good. So deputy chief, regional chief, again, you got into emergency management. What's the difference between the two, from crisis and then / emergency? Is that just after the fact?
I think emergency management, crisis management, to me, is all the same vein of things. I was charged with overseeing not only our police force at the VA in my last assignment before I retired from law enforcement, but also our emergency management capabilities for the hospital. And plans are only so good as they are operational. And what I mean by that is that a lot of people have plans, They have SOPs. They have all these books sitting on a shelf collecting dust, but rarely do people, because sometimes that's a compliance thing. Hey, we need to have it. And obviously at the VA, we're required by regulation to have those things. However, those plans are only good as they're tested. Plans are great, but you have to try to execute those plans to see if they actually work. And there's a lot of organizations out there that have plans sitting on the shelves that they've never really exercised, which is a challenge. And I think nowadays it's more critical than ever to be prepared. And so we did what we could to be prepared at the VA as far as that's concerned. I think the team I had did a fantastic job.
A lot of training.
Yeah, there was a lot of training, but not just from the VA. We really worked very collaboratively with our local agencies, LASD, LAPD, and being in Long Beach, we were close to here. So working very collaboratively with our community partners was a core part of our strategy. And I think that's better because nowadays, and even a decade ago, every agency needs to work together. And that's just my personal opinion because we can no longer do it on our own. So you need to establish those relationships, those friendships, those partnerships long before the emergency ever arrives at your doorstep.
Yeah, 100%. Did you get a lot of cooperation? Did you get the cooperation? And if you, it just doesn't, to me, what I saw, and obviously with LA County or LAPD, they're bigger organizations. We supported a lot of the cities, like contract cities.
Yeah.
So a contract city would have the air support, SEB. They couldn't afford their own police department. So we were there to support them in that fashion. To me, even with companies today, it's always, nobody's really proactive. They're just reactive and they wait till it happens. You talk about plans sitting on the shelf. I totally agree. They're sitting on the shelf. What? Now, how long have they been sitting on the shelf? And things change.
Yep.
Things change. And so what you're doing, especially with your background, I guess that's really where it goes into your company's secure measures. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay, so taking all this experience and going into these companies and say, hey, let's take a look at your books.
Yeah.
Let's see how we can incorporate it, and then understanding that organization and what their problems are, what they had in the past. Do they usually call you, or do you find, because I know you're doing a lot of training right now, but do they usually call you after the fact? Do you find that, or is there anybody really proactive? What's it take for somebody to be proactive? It's a reactive one.
I think it's actually both because we have a few different training verticals that we're typically in. But what I find is that sometimes organizations will have what I refer to as a close call. They'll have something happened out in the field or something like that, and then somebody will say, hey, call Dave. He has a background in this. Maybe you want to talk to him a little bit and get a sense for what you could do about it. And I start all of those engagements off with just having a conversation, just trying to find out more about what are their goals, what are you trying to achieve through training. And I've frequently told people that some people, from like workplace violence is an example, and I know we're all over the map here, but workplace violence, that's a requirement here in California. Every organization through SB 553 is required to have a operational workplace violence prevention program. But I always tell people compliance is the floor, not the ceiling. You shouldn't just stop at compliance. You shouldn't just meet the standard. You should exceed the standard wherever possible, because there's no greater risk than to your people, especially from a violent or a threat actor or something along those lines. So the reality is don't look at compliance as, well, we have a policy, we did the training, so we're good. No, this is an ongoing, and this needs to be woven into the culture of your organization. And you and I both know that the culture of an organization is usually the most difficult to change or impact because, and especially in our line of work, I've heard this on numerous occasions, this is the way we've always done it. That's a very dangerous, in my opinion, dangerous way to look at the world, because threats and risks are constantly evolving and you have to evolve with them.
Yeah, and it's scary that the top thinks that way, especially when they're responsible for all the employees and people in a building. Yeah. And they always, again, they're not taking the proactive approach. What's your best customer? Just get back. Let's do a little bit about. Sorry about that. Let's go back. As far as secure measures, when did you establish that? Okay, and who was your first customer? What was your thought? I should say, what was your real thought process with secure measures? How'd you come up with a name? And
when I thought about retiring from law enforcement, I felt like, okay, and I think like many of us who've retired from the profession, what are we going to do after is always the question. And I really wanted to do something, in my view, that was meaningful and was in some ways just for me, because we've spent our careers serving and protecting the public. Now I can do that, but I can do it in a way where I get to make the decisions about how I do that. And so in starting my business, I thought, what would be an appropriate name? And we provide secure measures to prevent threats, risks, and hazards. And we help implement those things. We help create those things in some cases. And then we teach people how to navigate challenging or risk type of situations. And ironically, one of my first customers was the LA County Sheriff's Department.
Wow, big org.
Without a doubt. And that stemmed directly from my work at the VA. So those relationships and things at the time, and you asked me a little bit earlier, the difference between crisis and emergency and things like that. I think in the corporate security world, when we think of crisis management, we're thinking differently than we think of crisis at the law enforcement level right now. Crisis is usually mental health crisis. So having worked very collaboratively with the LA County Sheriff's Department on a number of initiatives surrounding our veteran community, we partnered with the Sheriff's Department to create one of the very first veteran crisis response teams here in LA County that would co-respond with our local law enforcement, so that my team at the hospital would roll out with LASD, LAPD, whoever, to meet veterans in the community where they are and try to help them navigate. Because being a veteran myself and having seen the devastation that war sometimes creates for some of our military folks when they come back, they're very different. And I frequently teach this to our public safety partners, which is military does a great job programming us to do the jobs they want us to do in the military. They do a terrible job at deprogramming us to go back to civilian life. So when now you're at the VA hospital, you're seeing that in real time, and you're seeing people in all kinds of different types of crisis. Sometimes it's medical emergencies, but a lot of times it's mental health crisis. So working very collaboratively with the Sheriff's Department, when I finally retired, the then lieutenant over the MET team, which I know you're familiar with, the mental evaluation team, whose only goal pretty much is to respond to mental health crisis here in LA County and get those folks into a system of care. This isn't something where people are getting arrested and taken to jail. This is where people are getting the help that they need generally. And so when I left, I had a conversation with the lieutenant, said, hey, I want you to help us develop the curriculum for California Post so we can have our deputies trained on how to respond to veterans who are in crisis.
Let me ask you, Biscayne Center.
Yep.
They turned that facility into, did they do that? Is that right? Did they turn Biscayne facility into more of a housing for mental or veteran?
No, actually, Biscayne is now a training facility for custody.
Okay.
Custody folks, we've done a lot of training for the custody folks there, as well as patrol and some of the other courts and things of that nature. But Biscayne is mostly a training facility now. I know it used to be a jail.
Yeah, I was there in 1988.
Yes.
It's amazing.
My partner who I teach with is a Marine Corps vet, is a crisis negotiator for SEB. We teach a lot of these veteran classes, and he was telling me stories like when we're in the classroom, that used to be a dorm room. Yeah.
That was the academy up in the hill.
Yeah.
211 West Temple.
Yep.
Yeah, the grinder.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've spent a lot of time there over the last 5 or 6 years teaching.
Okay. Now, you're teaching the deputies to basically stabilize the situation while you guys roll out. Okay. Those rollouts, are those hostage type situations, or somebody that's locked himself in a room, or like a 5150 call, health and safety call? When do you guys actually roll out with the deputies?
All the above.
Okay.
And the program itself has evolved. Initially, in 2018, we had one of our VA police officers paired up with a VA mental health clinician. Things have evolved to the point where now the Sheriff's Department has its own veteran, what we call veteran mobile response team. It's a sergeant and 5 deputies, and that's all they do is respond to crises involving veterans. But there are times where they will have a VA clinician riding with them. So that's how deep the partnership is right now between
Wow.
the VA and the Sheriff's Department, to the point where everybody is collaborating at such a high level that you have VA federal clinicians who are actually riding with LA County Sheriff's deputies to resolve crisis here in LA County.
Countywide. Do they have their separate cars and they respond individually?
Yes.
Okay.
So typically, for instance, one of the clinicians I know at the VA in West LA, their program, the deputy will swing by and pick the clinician up, and then they'll go out and they'll respond to calls whenever those calls come in. And most people aren't aware of this, but we have the largest population density of veterans and military personnel anywhere in the country here in LA County. We're ground zero. We have about 280,000, maybe 85,000. So we have a need to have these type of teams.
God, Dave, I was just thinking back in the day, that was not even, so really, 9/11 really created a lot of problems with veterans coming back.
We've been at war up until 2021. We had been at war for over 20 years.
Yeah, because I was in custody when the war broke out. They were taking a lot of guys from the department were reserves.
Yep.
Going over there. It's just amazing the impact. I don't know why everybody feels like it's just one or two people out of 100, but it's quite a few.
Yeah.
Quite a few.
Yeah. We have a very large population density, and crisis can pop up at any time and for any reason. So these teams go out and they do the Lord's work by making sure that they're taking care of the folks that protect this country, which I think is very noble and very admirable. But I know most of those folks are also veterans themselves, and they're very dedicated to that work. And it's not for the notoriety. It's not for the pats on the back or a certificate you might get from a senior leader somewhere. It's because the work is meaningful.
Yeah, it has to be.
Yeah.
There was just because they're in crisis themselves. Every response, everything's unique, everything's different. I can imagine because people are different, their situation's different. What a skill set that is.
Yeah.
What a skill set. Could you get what is the primary calls now? Or is it people on the street that they're talking to in Skid Row? Is it a call for high priority call for service, a domestic dispute, so to speak? Or
so recently, the team rolled out to a barricade with LAPD, and this female veteran had been threatening suicide, and she was barricaded. So and this is why the partnership with the VA and our local agencies is so important, because our partners at the VA who run their veteran mobile crisis team responded to the scene, and they were able to provide a lot of background information on the veteran, which helped them achieve a positive response. And they got her out, and they got her into care. They got her into help. So that's one kind of example, but magnified on a much broader scale. Every day it's something different.
just thinking myself, okay, somebody's in barricading like that. The worst thing we could do is flashbang in and kick in the door. It's going to be a bad experience no matter what. Versus, like you said, having the veterans there, has some history on the person, mentioning names or somebody within an organization or a sergeant or whatever that they knew in the past. To hit that trigger point to just break them away for a minute or think different. That's huge. It really is.
And then now there's a much broader partnership with, you have the VA, you have LASD, but then just as important is the LA County Department of Military Veteran Affairs. They provide a lot of what I would say parallel services to the VA. They help with claims and benefits and other things, but they also help with housing. But it's like everybody's integrated. It's not, you work for the county for a long time. A lot of times a county like this, there's a lot of silos, not as it relates to veterans. I think, and a lot of people think we don't have enough resources for veterans. They're not getting what they need. We have tons of resources here. I think that the bigger challenge is most people don't know about them. So when we have the opportunity to get in front of that young deputy who's out on patrol in Lakewood or elsewhere, we give them a ton of resources. Here's all the people you need to call if you come across a veteran in crisis. And we have, I think the last number I heard is we have roughly 5,000 homeless veterans currently living on our streets. Rough. And that's a hard thing for anything, but there are efforts right now to house all of those veterans by, I think it was 2028 or 2030 or something like that whole group of folks. And they're in the process of building all brand new housing at the West LA VA, and that's going to be the new Warrior Center. So there's a lot of movement around the veteran community here.
Vision Insights is the simplest, most powerful security guard management software. No long training, no complicated systems. Guards can start reporting in minutes. Train your teams with micro trainings. attaching video to individual checkpoints to walk them through sensitive procedures. Submit accurate reports every time with dynamic observations that automatically rewrite, categorize, and prioritize, removing human error. And grow your business with daily, monthly, and quarterly insights, the most advanced reports available today. Vision Insights, the simplest, most powerful way to report.
I'm so glad you're here, man. That is really great to hear. But how about medical care? Because I hear the medical care is a nightmare in the VA. So we're doing all these other things to house them, but the most important part is the medical care. Are they really getting treated?
Yes.
They are getting much better?
I'm a patient at the VA, so
Okay.
I will speak for me
Okay.
because I think that every veteran has had a different experience at the VA, which is, I think my care has been pretty good, but you also have to be an advocate for yourself. I think the bigger challenge in the past was acquiring your service disability or your what they call your service connection. That tended to be a little bit more of a hurdle. Most of the time you can walk into any VA business office, you can get your VA identification card and get your health care. Some veterans experience challenges with appointments, and I think over time it's gotten better, but there's so much room for improvement, especially for folks who served their country, deployed, went to combat, did a bunch of stuff, and then came back, and now they're leaning into the promise that was made to them. Hey, when you sign up for the military, you basically, your health care is going to be taken care of for the rest of your life. And sometimes the VA in and of itself makes it difficult because of either how they're operating or how they're doing it. But I can speak for me and say I've gotten pretty good care at the VA. And I've had other veterans express that they have too, but I've also encountered veterans when I worked at the VA that were angry, and they would call the medical center, and when they were told they couldn't get an appointment, now they start making threats. Hey, what do I need to do? Do I need to come down there with a gun to get an appointment? That's the level of frustration somebody gets to. And most of the time there was no intent on their part to do that. But veterans, just like law enforcement, fire, EMS, we have no filter. And sometimes they just say things. And then when you layer in substance abuse, mental health issues, different physical health issues, when you layer in all that stuff, the frustration level rises, and they can say things that they sometimes don't always mean. But whenever a veteran did say that, we took those threats seriously. You have to, because you just don't know where that person is when they're in crisis like that, and you have to at least reach out to them and talk with them and figure out what to do and help manage that situation.
Yeah, so I can imagine the protocol. Anytime somebody says something like that, it goes into crisis mode. They got to do their investigation and figure out whether it's a threat or just a comment.
Yeah, without a doubt.
A lot of training, right?
Yeah.
So what you're teaching the people there with the LASD, how long is that class? Are you doing the academy? Is it part of the academy curriculum? Are they starting there?
No. So we come in more as advanced officer training,
Okay.
if you look at that. And we have 2 classes that we currently teach. Both of those are post 8 hours, post and STC, so our custody partners, probation. And those are 8 hours. The first one is more foundational, lays the cultural nuances of serving in the military and the difference between combat vets and non-combat vets. We have guest speakers with lived experience. We do experiential training with our Milo simulator to give deputies the opportunity to stabilize crisis, because we've walked away from the word de-escalation. We still use it, but not in the classical context. We have a very specific, what we call crisis stabilization model that we teach. That was, at least in our vet classes, that was co-developed with LASD.
Really?
Yeah.
Would you say obviously way more advanced than de-escalation, right? It's really kind of getting to...
I think de-escalation is a very misused and misunderstood term, because a lot of people think de-escalation is just simply, you just got to talk them down and that's it. And there's more to it. There's a lot more to it. And people think if you just listen and talk nice, people are going to come down. And crisis is not linear. It's not. Crisis is somebody's up and then they come down and then they may level off and then they may escalate again. So there's a lot of different aspects to that. We're changing the terminology to crisis stabilization rather than just de-escalation, because crisis can really be anything. Because crisis isn't just mental health crisis. I know we use it in that terminology a lot, but maybe it's somebody's in financial crisis. I go on X and I see people losing their mind over Bitcoin and things like that. So they lost a lot of money, which is terrible. But the reality is, are they now in financial crisis because they lost all their money? Yeah. That's not necessarily a mental health crisis. So there's different kinds of crisis. And this model has the ability to encompass a lot of those things.
That's really, God, it's taking me down a whole different road. It's very interesting. It really is.
And we actually just rolled this framework out to LA County Probation. So we just trained probably about 50 or so of their crisis intervention teams, which is both probation and LA County Department of Mental Health. So they're clinicians. So we trained a cohort of them, and there may be an opportunity to insert that into their academy to make that kind of a baseline. We'll see where that goes, but that suggestion was made. But because you want to get people, especially dealing with our most vulnerable populations, our justice-involved folks, our juveniles, things like that, that requires a different type of oversight in terms of how they interact with folks in some of our juvenile halls and things of that nature.
Yeah, that'd be a big difference, man. Could we say this? You started this, right? Pretty much. They knew they had a problem, but they wanted to get more focused, right?
Yeah, so LASD basically said, we want to know more about our veterans, and we want you, having worked at the VA for 7 years, I am a veteran, and I think I have a unique perspective because I spent a long time in law enforcement, I spent a long time in the military, and then dealing with crisis after crisis at the hospital, you really learn a lot. And so I've taken all of those experiences and now shaped that into training for our first responders.
That's pretty cool, everything about it. Isn't that funny? How you're training and you figure where you started, where you come from, and where you build. Everything here. You could totally just see the progression right here. That's really
it's interesting when you look back. I would agree with that. But my trajectory didn't feel like that. If that makes sense. And when I left law enforcement in 2019, I thought, what am I going to do? And then I said, let me start a company. And initially, we were doing security assessments. We were doing consultative type of work. But I love the training. And that has since expanded greatly into a lot of different verticals that we're doing training for. So
your training, I love training when it's interesting. And I hate to put it that way. It's like a good book.
Okay.
Right. So I can only imagine the presenter that you are in the training, when somebody loves what they do, that's a huge part, the trainer itself. So do you find yourself doing most of the training? Do you try to get other people like-minded? How do we take you and take trainers out of you?
So I'll ask a question back to you. When was the last time you heard a deputy, and I'm going to use that this is a very specific case. When was the last time a deputy told you that they enjoyed the training so much that they wanted it to be longer?
Never.
We get those comments about our training. I've been told any number of times this training needs to be longer, which is unheard of in public safety. And that's not a brag. Those are actual comments. So that lets me know that I'm on the right path. I take training feedback very seriously. And I really take a look at our training programs because I'm not here to check the box. I'm here to drop some knowledge and to make real impact. I'm not here if you want me to bring me in just to check a box, you're probably not a good fit. But I don't really see that with the sheriff's department. They want systemic change on how they handle calls involving veterans. So that's why we're there. And I have other like-minded instructors, like my partner, Jeff. Shout out to Jeff. He's a crisis negotiator with SEB. He's a contract deputy. And typically he retired and now he's back as a contract deputy. He's a crisis negotiator. And why? Because he loves it. He's been doing it for 40 years.
Wow.
He's a Marine Corps vet. And obviously being in the Air Force, he says, I still owe my country a debt of military service for being in the Air Force. But that's a typical Marine.
Well,
right?
Air Force, hey, we got picks of smart people, right? I don't mean to say that in a bad way. But it's not easy to get in the Air Force. They're pretty particular, right?
Shout out to my Marine Corps brothers
That's
and sisters.
Funny.
But he and I teach fairly frequently together because can I teach all this stuff by myself? Sure, I can. I choose not to. because I really think having other perspectives in class really take every class in a different direction. I have other folks that I teach with. Another partner of mine, Joe, he's an Army vet. So I try to bring in those folks that have different perspectives and add value to the training. And we frequently get rave reviews for our training. Why? Because and you know this to be true as well, which is you can tell when you have an instructor up there that's phoning it in or is just up there telling war stories for the sake of telling war stories, really not getting anything out of the class.
Yeah.
And if you're doing that to your classes, shame on you, number one. But also more importantly, I think when I started creating a lot of our curriculum, I approached it from two different angles. Number one, what do I want people to really know? And what do I want them to walk away with? And then the other thing is I've hated myself sitting through boring training. So how do I make this interesting? Where do I put in, where's a good place for a video here? How do we stimulate dialogue? I ask classes a lot of questions because I want them to be engaged and I want them to feel comfortable asking questions. I think that's more important. I just don't stand up there and talk. There's a lot of interaction. What do you all think about what I just said? And then I just let it sit and I wait for somebody to answer. And I think being engaging is super important if you're doing training.
Yeah. So your classrooms are still, when you're done, tell me this, when you're done with your lecture, that room's still full, huh? People want to talk to you. You want to thank you so much, I'm sure.
You know what's interesting? Yes, that does happen. But what happens more frequently is a lot of people start sharing like vulnerable stuff, which you wouldn't ordinarily think a class like that would do, but you have folks that start sharing, hey, my brother or my family member,
Wow.
they're having an issue or whatever, or maybe a video we show brought somebody to tears because it impacted them personally. And they talk with us afterwards and they thank us for just shining a light on certain things that maybe impacted them personally. So those are those days when I go home and reflect that's why I do what I do, to make a real impact. And when people are emotionally connected, you've done what you needed to do.
That's a great feeling, Scott. That's a great feeling, Dave.
Without a doubt.
Great feeling. The impact of the department, I know that you know that they're keeping record on their calls for service, their response, that's all they're doing now is documentation. The deputies have to document just about everything in the field now.
Yeah.
Big reduction, I imagine, right? As far as, or is there, I'm sure there's some kind of reduction as far as, when I say reduction, things have gotten better.
I would say so.
Or is it still a work in progress?
I would say it's always going to be a work in progress.
True statement.
I don't think you're ever going to really be done with that, but I think that you need to have passionate, dedicated people making an effort. And we have that in Technicolor here in LA County. There are so many switched on, way better people than me out there doing really impactful work. And they don't want money. They don't want fame. They just want the knowledge that, hey, you know what? I helped a brother or sister today. That in and of itself feels good, right? When you're helping folks. But there's also the reality is that you can't help everybody. And there have been a couple of incidents where I know the teams, they lost somebody to suicide or something like that. And that kind of hit home. Maybe it was a veteran they were working with. And you have to realize we lose roughly 20 veterans a day to suicide.
Do we really?
Yes, we do. And that's a rough number. The common number that's out there is 22 a day. But that number has ebbed and flowed over the years. And I use the rough number 20 because that's about the average. I think it went down to 17.6 at one point, and then it was as high as I think 29 something. But that's roughly 20 veterans a day to suicide.
Is the military looking at ways now to deprogram people better when they leave, or recognize? Are they doing anything on their side now before it comes to you? I guess you could say before it gets down here to where it's a problem.
No, I think Department of War looks at things from the aspect of we're here to train warfighters. The VA is there to take care of our warfighters. And it's not to say that they don't work collaboratively, but I think there is a disconnect just from my personal view. Because when folks get out of the military, usually they go through nowadays they go through something called TAPS, which is Transition Assistance Program. And that's basically to prepare you to transition. And that's one of the most difficult things some veterans face, not all, but some veterans face when they leave military services, their transition. Because a lot of times they leave, it's thanks, appreciate you. And that's really kind of it. And then you go to this transition assistance program, and some places have really good ones, but the majority of veterans that I've talked to that have left military service said, yeah, they showed me how to write a resume, and then they had some contractor come in and tell us about this, that, and the other. And it didn't really land, and it didn't really reflect maybe their real world condition. And so a lot of veterans, they leave and then they struggle. They get back to their home of record or wherever they're planning on staying, and then they're not knowing where to go or what to do. So we have some robust systems here in LA County that kind of help. So when a veteran comes here to LA County, if they go directly to LA County Military Veteran Affairs, that's the main door, and they have a transition program that lets them know about every resource here in LA County. But you have to first know about that, because I run into veterans all the time, deputies, as an example, who are reservists, who still haven't gotten their service connection, still haven't gotten any other benefits, any of that. So I do take a few moments during class to chastise them a little bit, not in a mean way. But hey, you know what, brother, sister, these are benefits that you earned. So you need to go get them. And I will connect you to the appropriate people in order to do that. I feel like that's an opportunity for me to reach out and touch folks who may not have thought, because obviously if you're working for the county or another place, you already have healthcare benefits and all this other stuff. So some of that, the stuff you did in the military, kind of becomes an afterthought. But I tell people, your service disability has got nothing to do with your employment as a sheriff's deputy, nothing. So go to those things, or here's a connection, give me your email, I will connect you directly. I do that all the time. We really try to help those folks, the ones that are deserving of benefits, get them.
Man, I can only imagine your partner's story too. You got a hell of a story. I can only imagine.
For the most part.
Wow. So you've got a huge contract, obviously, with LASD.
Actually, I would argue we are a very trusted training partner to the county, not just LASD.
The county of Los Angeles.
The county, because we are now.
That's true. Probation, all that.
We just did probation. We've gotten some calls from public health, and last year we did a whole bunch of training, and we're getting ready to embark on a much larger project for the LA County Department of Military Veteran Affairs. We're in discussions there. But yeah, and because of the relationships there, we've also been now doing not only law enforcement training, but now we're going out and working with our community-based organizations like Salvation Army. Like we train a lot of their outreach folks, because they're knocking on doors, they're going out and they're interacting with folks who might have substance abuse issues or mental health issues. So we teach them aspects of crisis stabilization so they can be safe, because they don't have all the toys that you and I had as a deputy or a police officer. They have to go out and they have to use this and they have to use this. So what do? We created a whole field risk management training for them. And we've routinely given that to a lot of organizations very similar. And a lot of people know the Salvation Army, right? But a lot of organizations very similar to that.
I've heard great things about Salvation Army, and I never thought much about them.
Amazing. You don't really think about what they do. And they also have a group of folks that do just veteran stuff. So we did a whole series of training for them last year. We're going to go back and do another series of trainings for them this year. But they're amazing people and working in very underserved and marginalized communities, which I think is amazing. And they're out there doing the hard work every day. And so giving them a good baseline of training to keep themselves safe is super important. And they appreciate it.
Yeah. Do you have any of your training for like online? Do you have anything like that where people can go? These are incredible courses. I can just imagine.
So yes, we have a learning management system. We have a bunch of what I call micro-learning courses on safety, security, mental health. We're doing a different series of trainings, but because this is relatively new, we're getting ready to launch it in the new year. We're going to be putting some of our longer form content on there. I just have to do it.
Yeah.
I have to record it. I have to get it online, but all of these classes will eventually be in some form of asynchronous learning. Absolutely.
I think that would be incredible. I'd be excited to go through that and watch those, learn more. Just what I feel really bad for the veterans. You hear about it, but you don't realize how it's just amazing.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of veterans out there that are thriving and doing great things. It's not every single veteran is struggling, but there are those that also suffer in silence, and you'll never know about those until you read about it in the news or something along those lines. And we frequently tell people, look, if you're struggling, go get help. And that's the hardest thing for us in either being a veteran or in law enforcement, is saying, hey, I have a problem. Because the mentality going into the military was, if we wanted you to have feelings, we would have issued them to you.
Yeah.
And it's the same in law enforcement. And we need to get away from that. We need to be a little bit more emotionally intelligent on how we, especially law enforcement leaders, you need to be a little bit more emotionally intelligent and understand that sometimes your people are going to struggle, especially the ones that are out there. Excuse me. And you need to give them the space. You need to give them the space to have those moments and not be judgmental. And obviously, as a leader, you're always looking at risk management. But I think that there's more of a risk if you're taking punitive measures against folks for having a bad day than trying to understand why they're having a bad day. So asking the question, instead of saying, what's wrong with you, asking, what happened to you? It's a much better question.
That's the best thing I've heard in a very long time.
So
it's like the Mike Trotter conversation where he hit home, right?
Yeah.
The leaders.
Yeah. And me being a senior leader in law enforcement, the old adage of we've always done it this way, and I know I said that earlier, but we've always done it this way, or this is the way law enforcement is. It doesn't have to be that way. I had a good friend who's also a chief of police. When I pointed out, as a chief, I had what I would consider to be very poor work-life balance, because I was always attached to my duty phone or email or something, because I'm always getting notifications and things like that. And he reminded me that was a choice, because I set poor boundaries, and he was 100% correct. And that goes out, that shout out goes to Chief Paul LeBaron. He was the chief at Hermosa Beach, who retired not too long ago. But he said, yeah, he goes, you failed to establish boundaries. And I respect the hell out of Paul. And that really resonated with me, because I'm like, you're right. If you tolerate those kind of things, you're going to continue to do them. As a former chief, that was one of my takeaways. Being a chief, that consumed me, but it's because I didn't set appropriate boundaries.
You know what? Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I learned something from that too right now. I haven't set boundaries too. Just you get really busy, period. It's a good one for everybody to hear.
Without a doubt.
How long did it take you to set boundaries? How did you do it?
Still not quite there, right?
Yeah.
Because, and this also, when you're running a business, it's 24/7, but it doesn't have to be. So do I now bring in or farm out specific work?
Yeah.
I'm not a technical person. So if I need, AI is becoming a big thing, and I'm leaning into AI a lot and trying to figure out how I can leverage that to streamline our operations or those kinds of things. But because I know about AI, but I don't know the programming or technical aspect of it. And I'm not going to learn. Yeah. And it's not because I wouldn't want to learn. It's because I don't have time, because I'm very customer facing, obsessed with making sure that our trainings are up to date and we're providing a high level of customer service. And that's where I need to be. I don't need to learn all this technical stuff that I can technically hire somebody to do. And that way I can focus on the most important things. So maybe in essence, I've set boundaries in terms of what I'm willing to channel my energy towards versus what I'm not.
Yeah.
And that has come out of a lot of first starting the business and feeling like a cat with a laser pointer. Like, where do I focus on? Where do I focus on?
Good one, yeah.
So I think over time it's gotten to, okay, I need to figure out, what am I good at? What am I not good at? And then how do I bring in the talent to help me with the things I'm not good at?
Wow.
And you have to do a really deep dive to figure out and be vulnerable and say, I'm not good at this. As veterans and first responders, just that mentality of, I got this, is sometimes hurtful, because when you should ask for help, sometimes you don't. So I've gotten away from that. Or I would argue I've gotten better about that. And in the beginning, I was like, I got this. I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But in the time it's taking me to figure something out, it's taking me 5 times as long to get something resolved or addressed or whatever, when I could have just picked up the phone and said, hey, Scott, can you help me, brother? I got something on, and he would help me in a heartbeat. But you also have to be willing to ask for that help.
Sure. No, it's a very good point. Appreciate you sharing that. Very good. I think we all got a lesson from that one, no doubt. So how do we find you, Dave? Give us our website. Tell us how we find you if you want to be found. I know you're busy.
No, I always want to be found. I love connecting with other folks. So if you go to secure-measures.com, that is our website. Send us a message. Or I'm all over LinkedIn, as you are, as Bill is, as Dan and Scott and everybody else.
Sure.
So certainly you can find me on LinkedIn, and that's how I primarily communicate.
Got any new exciting things coming up as far as new trainings or anything that you're going to be adding to your training?
One of the training verticals that we have embarked on, and I would classify it more as a pilot right now, is down in San Diego, partner with my partner Joel, who runs Practical Defense Systems and is the host of the Gun Guy TV podcast. Shout out to Joel. He does a lot of the concealed carry licensing down in San Diego. And so what we have done is the licensing piece, that's a 16-hour class, by the way. But the one thing that was never included in that class is decision-making. So you have people who purchase a firearm, have decided that the law allows me to get a concealed carry permit, so I'm going to carry a gun, but they've never been pressure tested. And a lot of people go into this space thinking that they are more skilled than they actually are. And that's not a slam on them. We get a ton of training in law enforcement. And even then, some cops are not the greatest shots at all.
Nope.
So now you have a situation where you have a armed citizen, which is clearly becoming more and more of a thing, which I'm all for, by the way. And so we've introduced our Milo simulator. And Milo, shout out to Milo and the crew over there. We are strategic partners with Milo. And we use our simulator, which is basically a firearm simulator, and we run our concealed carry folks through decision making. And that is the biggest piece, and that's not a requirement to get your CCW. So we're pretty much the only ones right now in San Diego that are doing that. And then the response we have gotten from a lot of the firearms owners and folks that have come through the class, the first question we always get is, how do I do more of this? So we did 2 things. We have 2, what I call them tactical pistol classes. One is more of a home defense kind of class. They're 3 hours long at our office in San Diego. And then we have a tactical pistol 2, which multiple subjects and things like that. It really just teaches them to focus on the appropriate things. And it's not just about carrying a firearm. It's about using it responsibly. And then off of those, we also now created a membership program. So basically you can enroll in our membership program. And it's a very low bar to entry. It's $29 a month, and you get to schedule personal time with me or one of our instructors. And it's just like a gym membership. And we schedule a time on a weekend. You come down and we work on whatever you want. If you want to work on tactics, if you want to work on decision making, if you want to work on drawing and all of that kind of stuff, we do some more intense and more in-depth training.
I'm glad I asked you that. I really am.
I'm glad you did too.
Yeah,
I almost forgot about it.
Dave, you promised me this, and I always say this to everybody. I want to learn more about that.
Please.
Can I have you back, and can we talk more about Milo? And
100%.
Yeah, that is really, I'm very interested in that, and there's a lot of people I'd love to feed. Yeah. Because everybody's sitting at home, everybody's panicked, everybody's locked down.
And another big shout out to Scott is when he talks about at Security X, when we talked about security, law enforcement zero, security zero, we're now looking at an age where, as a private citizen, you should know how to be able to handle business because law enforcement agencies are short. Everybody is shorthanded.
Great point. Great point, Dave.
So teaching your average citizen to responsibly defend themselves, I think, is key. So we've started this pilot in San Diego at our office down there, partnering with our partners at Practical Defense Systems, using the Milo system. We've gotten rave. Like, everybody that goes through there is just amazed. And it's also a very humbling experience for folks because when they realize I can't get my gun out, I couldn't get it out fast enough, or maybe the way I'm carrying it is
not like the movies, huh?
everybody walks out of there with a real sense of, I need to train more and I need to be more proficient at this because this could mean the difference between life and death in a situation.
Dave, remember when we were in the academy? I don't know if you remember. They have the target in front of you, and it's dark.
Yep.
And you got to draw from your holster and shoot a target that's 2 feet in front of you.
Yep.
And then you miss that target. Gives you a whole nother perspective.
100%.
Yeah. So the old day, you turn your gun sideways just like you.
And the strategies we teach, it's not really just, it's the best gunfight those civilians are ever going to be in is the one they avoid.
Absolutely.
So we teach them specifically avoidance. We teach them aspects of de-escalation, or verbal, or may not be a crisis, but how to bring the temperature down so you don't get into a confrontation, and then how do we disengage? Strategic disengagement. Right?
All right. So I'm going to have you say that again for the listeners, because that's really important. All right. I don't want to drag on the podcast, but you brought up a very good point. Just because you own a gun and you're licensed, say it again. You teach them how to get away, not you, because you'll hear ops guys, special op guys go, hey, best thing you could do is avoid a fight, not get in one. You're not training to get in one. You're training to avoid one. So say that again for them.
We teach avoidance. First and foremost, we teach situational awareness. We teach a lot of the principles that you and I learned probably in the academy, paying attention to your surroundings. If you're walking around with your phone buried in your face, you're not really paying attention to the threats, risks, and hazards that are out there. And it's not just about somebody trying to rob you. I've seen people walk into the street not paying attention, get hit by a bus because they're too engrossed on what's going on their phone. But if you're carrying a firearm, you need to be readily aware of, and that doesn't mean you need to be paranoid, but if you're situationally aware, you could potentially pick up on something and avoid it, rather than walking right into it.
Yep.
And then teaching disengagement strategies. How do I get out of there? And that leads back to situational awareness. Have I left myself a way to get out of here if something goes sideways?
Yeah.
So I think teaching all of those aspects are incredibly important, and making sure that your average citizen, especially those responsible gun owners, know a lot of that. And it's interesting, there's a lot of spec op guys. Jocko's one of them. And I'll bring up Jocko. I watched a podcast where he said, somebody asked him, if somebody comes up to confront you, he goes, I run away. I absolutely run away. I don't want to get into a fight with anybody. I don't want to engage somebody unnecessarily, because at the end of the day, a Navy SEAL is highly trained and they're going to put a hurting on you.
Yeah.
And Jocko owns businesses. He owns a lot of things that he's now putting himself at legal and financial risk by getting involved in something like that. And that's not a place I want to be either. And if I fully concur with that logic, so that's what we teach is you don't want to be involved in anything. And by the way, the other thing I tell our gun owners, you are not legally required to be involved in anything. So you have to really consider and weigh the situation very heavily. And sometimes you have to do that really fast. But if you see a situation unfolding in front of you, what is your best option? And sometimes it's not your firearm. Sometimes it's getting on the phone and calling 911.
Absolutely.
So you're not legally required to intervene in anything. It's not your job.
Yep, absolutely. Wow. I could really help out with that with the security industry alone. Those who are going to carry guns, they should take that course, because I don't believe in go down to the training facility with 50,000 people just running through an hour course. It should be more specific, more focused, and I would be thrilled as an owner to know that you, guys like Scott and everybody else and your partner, are doing the training and offering those courses. I know what I'm getting out of it, so that would be big. So we got to do that back. And then, hey, when you get a chance, let's throw the gauntlet and let's get Scott in here sometime.
Absolutely.
Both of you together.
Yes.
Have Scott in the other chair. I'd love to do this again if that's okay.
100% would be happy to do it. He's just the more handsome version of me, so it's good.
Well,
he's
a good-looking guy, and he's a great speaker, so he's gonna. But we'll get him in here. You guys do a great job with that. But okay, so Scott, we've thrown the gauntlet.
Yes.
And you've heard it from Dave.
This is very similar to the ice bucket challenge from many years ago.
There you go. Absolutely. Dave, thank you, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This has been fantastic.
Yeah,
really
a lot of fun.
My time.
All right, we're coming back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Comment, like, share, and subscribe.